Last summer, my family moved into a new house. It was a 2-story house with my bedroom upstairs and my parents' room downstairs. I love reading books late at night, sometimes until 3 or 4 in the morning. When we first moved in, I kept hearing weird sounds outside at night. It sounded like someone walking around our yard wearing jingling jewelry, but I didn't think much of it. I thought it was probably just a stray dog or cat making noise. Our house had been empty for 6 months before we moved in, so lots of animals probably wandered around. My upstairs room got really hot during summer nights. It was hard to sleep up there. My parents' room downstairs was much cooler and had a really comfortable bed. One night, my dad had to go away for work. My mom said I could sleep in her room since we were alone in the big house. I was happy about that. My mom's room gets a little bit of light from the street lamps outside, but it's still pretty dark. You have to wait for your eyes to get used to it. I went to sleep early that night, but then I had the worst nightmare ever. In my dream, I watched some bad people hurt someone and bury them in the ground. It felt so real, like I was actually there watching it happen. When I woke up, my hands were squeezed into tight fists and my fingers hurt. I was sweating all over my body. I wanted to check what time it was, so I reached under the bed for my phone. I was sleeping on my left side, and my mom was on my right side, facing the other way. My phone said 4:03 a.m. I decided to roll over to my other side. When I turned to look at my mom, I saw something that made my heart stop. There were 2 dark shapes standing in our room. They looked like girls, but I couldn't see their faces clearly. One was kneeling down, staring right at my sleeping mom. The other one was standing behind her. At first, I thought maybe I was still having a bad dream. I rubbed my eyes hard and looked again. They were still there. Then the standing one turned and looked right at me. I got so scared I could barely breathe. I shook my mom's shoulder. Mom, wake up." When she opened her eyes, I quickly looked back at the window. The scary shapes were gone. "What's wrong, honey?" my mom asked. I didn't want to scare her, so I made up an excuse. I just had a bad dream. I'm okay now." We both went back to sleep. The next day, my dad came home, so I had to go back to my own room upstairs. That night, I woke up again to the sound of kids playing and laughing outside. I thought it must be our neighbors having a party or something. I checked my phone for the time. It was exactly 4:03 a.m. again. How weird was that? Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs toward my room. Step, step, step. I held my breath and listened. My parents were fast asleep downstairs. Our neighborhood is very safe, so it couldn't be a bad guy trying to break in. I pulled my blanket over my head and eventually fell back asleep. The third night was the worst. Again, I woke up at exactly 4:03 a.m. This time, someone was banging really hard on my bedroom door. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't like a normal knock. It sounded angry. I was so scared I screamed, "Mom," but I knew she couldn't hear me. Her room was downstairs, her door was closed, and she always keeps her fan on the loudest setting. The thumping got louder and scarier. I was shaking all over. Finally, I called my dad on my phone and begged him to come upstairs. We got to my room. Nobody was at my door. But I know what I heard. It was real. 3 nights in a row, I woke up at exactly 4:03 a.m. and something spooky happened each time. I was too afraid to sleep alone anymore. A month later, we moved to a different house. I never woke up at 4:03 a.m. again, and I never heard those scary sounds. But sometimes I still wonder what was in that old house and why it always came at 4:03 in the morning. I've always believed in ghosts and scary spirits. Ever since I was a little kid growing up in the mountains, I saw lots of strange things that made me curious about the spirit world. My family and neighbors would do special ceremonies and rituals to protect themselves from bad spirits. I found all of this really interesting. But as I grew older and moved away from my mountain home, I got busy with regular life. I stopped thinking about ghosts and spirits. I thought I had left all that scary stuff behind me. I was wrong. The spirits weren't done with me yet. When I became an adult, I got a job that required me to live in a small village far away from any big cities. I had to live alone in a big apartment with 3 bedrooms. It was really quiet and lonely there. Maybe that's why I started thinking about ghosts again. I began reading books and websites about spirits and haunted places. I couldn't stop reading about them. I would stay up all night reading scary stories and watching videos about ghost hunters. Soon, I was spending every free moment learning about the supernatural world. But something bad started happening to me. The more I read about ghosts, the worse I felt. I stopped sleeping well at night. I forgot to eat meals because I was too busy reading. I started losing weight because I wasn't taking care of myself. My friends noticed I looked sick and tired all the time. I couldn't help myself, though. It was like the scary stories had cast a spell on me. I felt like I had to keep reading more and more. That's when things got really strange. I started feeling like something was watching me. When I was reading alone in my apartment, I would get a creepy feeling that I wasn't actually alone. Sometimes, I would see a dark shadow moving around the corner of my eye. When I turned to look, nothing was there. At first, I told myself it was just my imagination. "You're reading too many ghost stories," I said to myself. "Your brain is just playing tricks on you." But the feeling got stronger every day. Whatever was watching me felt angry and scary. When it came near me, my whole body would get cold and I would start shaking. I knew something bad was in my apartment with me. I tried to ignore it, but it was getting harder and harder. The dark shape was getting clearer. I could almost see what it looked like, but I was too scared to look directly at it. One night, something happened that changed everything. I was lying in my bed, trying to sleep, when I felt that scary presence again. It was stronger than ever before. Even though I was half asleep, I was so scared that I grabbed my phone. I had downloaded an app that was supposed to detect ghosts by measuring strange energy in the room. Before I could even open the app, something incredible happened. All the books on my bookshelf started falling to the floor. One by one, they tumbled down, making loud crashing sounds. Thud, thud, thud. I sat up in my bed, frozen with fear. There was no earthquake. No one was shaking the apartment. The books were just falling by themselves, like invisible hands were pushing them off the shelf. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just watched as all my books about ghosts and spirits crashed to the floor. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in my bed with all the lights on, staring at the pile of books on the floor. The next morning, I made a big decision. I gathered up all my ghost books and threw them away. I deleted all the scary websites from my computer. I stopped trying to contact spirits with those dangerous spirit boards. Instead, I started praying every day in my room and keeping it filled with positive energy. Slowly, things got better. The scary presence went away. I started eating and sleeping normally again. I felt like myself again. I was so happy to have my normal life back. A few months later, I got a new job in a different city. I moved to a new apartment and felt great. The scary experiences seemed like a bad dream from the past. But then I made a terrible mistake. One day, I was talking with an old friend on the phone. Somehow, we started talking about ghost stories and scary experiences. It brought back all my old curiosity about the spirit world. When I hung up the phone, I felt that familiar pull toward the supernatural again. Just one little look, I told myself, just a few ghost stories won't hurt. I was so wrong. I started reading scary stories online again. I began researching haunted places and watching ghost videos. Within days, I was just as obsessed as before. And just like before, I started feeling sick and tired again. But this time, something even more terrifying happened. One night, I was sleeping in my new apartment when I felt that familiar, scary presence. But this time, it didn't just watch me. It came right up to my bed. I felt something lean down, close to my ear. Then I heard a woman's voice whisper to me in a cold, scary tone, "Day after tomorrow." I shot up in bed, my heart pounding like crazy. I looked around my room, but I was completely alone. All the doors were locked. All the windows were closed. There was no way any real person could have been in my room. I tried to tell myself it was just a dream, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The voice had been too clear, too real. Day after tomorrow. What did that mean? What was going to happen to me in 2 days? I was terrified, but I didn't know what to do. How do you protect yourself from something that can whisper in your ear while you sleep? 2 days later, I found out exactly what the ghost woman had meant. I was riding my bicycle to work that morning when a car ran a red light and hit me. The accident was terrible. My arm and leg were badly hurt, and I had to go to the hospital. Luckily, I was wearing a helmet, or I might have died. As I lay in a hospital bed with my broken arm in a cast, I realized the truth. The ghost had warned me about the accident. She had whispered day after tomorrow because she knew exactly when it would happen. But why had she warned me? Was she trying to help me? Or was she the one who caused the accident to happen? I still don't know the answer to that question, and it scares me. Now, as I write this story, I'm afraid that talking about these experiences might bring that scary presence back into my life. I moved to a new place again, and so far, it's been peaceful. The ghost woman hasn't followed me here yet, but I've learned my lesson. I don't read ghost stories anymore. I don't try to contact spirits. I've realized that some doors should never be open because you never know what might come through them. The spirit world is real, and it's dangerous. Some things are better left alone. I just hope that by sharing my story, I haven't invited those dark forces back into my life. Because if that scary presence returns, I don't know if I'll be strong enough to send it away again. And I definitely don't want to hear any more whispered warnings about what's coming for me. A few years ago, my friend Jake and I went to visit my grandmother's grave at a big cemetery in California. It was a sunny afternoon, and we had brought some fresh flowers to put on her headstone. After we finished saying goodbye to Grandma, we started walking back toward my car. That's when Jake spotted something interesting. "Hey, look over there," he said, pointing up a small hill to the side of the main cemetery. "Check out those really old graves." I looked where he was pointing and saw a bunch of old, broken-down gravestones scattered across the hillside. They looked completely different from the neat, well-kept graves where my grandmother was buried. These graves looked forgotten and scary. "Let's go check them out," Jake said excitedly. I wasn't so sure it was a good idea, but Jake was already walking toward them. I didn't want to look like a chicken, so I followed him up the hill. As we got closer, I could see just how old and creepy these graves really were. The headstones were cracked and falling apart. Some had completely broken in half and were lying on the ground in pieces. The writing on them was so faded and worn away that you could barely read the names anymore. The grass around the graves was tall, brown, and dead-looking. Weeds were growing everywhere, and some had even grown right through the cracks in the headstones. It looked like no one had taken care of this part of the cemetery for many, many years. Jake was a few steps ahead of me, bending down to try to read the dates on the old stones. "Dude, some of these are from the 1700s, he called back to me. "That's like 300 years old." I stopped walking and looked around at all the broken graves. Something about this place felt wrong, really wrong. The air felt heavy and cold, even though it was a warm day. I got goosebumps on my arms, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I suddenly felt like we were bothering people who just wanted to be left alone. These weren't just old pieces of stone. They were the resting places of real people who had died hundreds of years ago. And here we were, just walking around on top of them like it was no big deal. "Jake," I called out, my voice shaking a little. "I don't think we should be here." He looked up at me from where he was kneeling next to a broken headstone. "What do you mean?" "I mean, these people have been sleeping here for hundreds of years. We're bothering them. We need to leave. Now." Jake laughed. "Come on, don't be such a scaredy cat. They're just old graves. but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. Something that didn't want us there. Seriously, Jake, we need to go. I have a really bad feeling about this. Just as I said those words, something incredible happened. Boom! The loudest sound I've ever heard in my life exploded through the cemetery. It was like someone had set off a giant firecracker right next to us. The sound was so loud it made my ears ring. All around us, hundreds of birds that had been sitting quietly in the trees suddenly burst into the air, squawking and flapping their wings frantically. The sky was filled with black birds flying in every direction, like they were all trying to escape from something terrible. Jake and I looked at each other with eyes as wide as dinner plates. "Run!" I screamed. We both took off running down that hill, as fast as our legs could carry us. I've never run so fast in my entire life. Behind us, I could still hear the birds making panicked noises as they flew away from the old graves. We reached my car, and I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the door open. My heart was beating so hard I thought it might explode. Get in, I yelled to Jake. But when Jake got to the passenger side of the car, he stopped and stared. Dude," he said in a quiet, shocked voice. "You need to see this." I ran around to his side of the car and couldn't believe what I saw. The passenger side window was completely gone. Not cracked, completely blown out. There was glass everywhere. Tiny pieces covered the ground around the car like glittering snow. The inside of the car was filled with glass too, all over the seats and floor. "What the heck happened to your car?" Jake whispered. I stared at the empty window frame, trying to understand what I was seeing. I don't know. It was fine when we got here. We both stood there in shocked silence, looking at all the glass. The window hadn't just broken, it had exploded outward like something had pushed it from the inside of the car. My hands were still shaking as I called my mom on my cell phone. "Mom, something really weird just happened," I said, trying not to sound as scared as I felt. "We're at the cemetery and someone broke my car window." "Oh no, are you boys okay?" she asked, worried. "Yeah, we're fine, but the whole window is blown out. There's glass everywhere." "Well, someone must have been playing around and threw a rock at it, or maybe someone shot it with a BB gun," my mom said. "You know how kids like to cause trouble sometimes." I looked around the quiet, empty cemetery. "But Mom, there's nobody else here. And we didn't see anyone when we got here either." "Honey, windows don't just break by themselves. Someone must have done it." But as I looked at the car, I noticed something strange. If someone had thrown a rock or shot the window from outside, wouldn't there be a rock or a BB somewhere? I looked all over the ground and inside the car. There was nothing but glass. And if someone had been hiding nearby to break our window, wouldn't we have seen them running away? The cemetery was pretty open. There wasn't anywhere to hide. Plus, what kind of person hangs out in a cemetery just waiting to break people's windows? "We'll figure it out when you get home," Mom said. "Just be careful driving back with no window." Jake and I carefully brushed the glass off the seats and got in the car. The whole drive home, neither of us said a word. We just sat there thinking about what had happened. That loud boom, the birds flying away like they were escaping from something dangerous, and then finding the window completely blown out with no explanation for how it happened. The more I thought about it, the more I realized what had really happened up there. When I said we shouldn't be bothering those old graves, something had been listening, something that agreed with me. The boom wasn't just a random loud noise, it was a warning. And when we didn't leave fast enough, that something had made sure we got the message loud and clear by destroying my car window. Those people buried in the old graves had been resting peacefully for hundreds of years. They didn't want curious kids walking around on top of them and reading their headstones for fun. They wanted to be left alone, and they had the power to make sure that happened. Jake and I never talked about what happened that day ever again. I think we both knew the truth, but it was too scary to say out loud. Sometimes when I drive past cemeteries now, I make sure to stay on the main roads and keep my windows rolled up tight. Because I learned that day that the dead don't always rest quietly. Sometimes they fight back. When I was 8 years old, my older brother played what he called a small, harmless prank on me. But it wasn't harmless at all. It was the cruelest thing anyone had ever done to me. He made me think he had killed our mother. He didn't actually kill her, of course. My brother isn't a murderer and never will be. But for one whole day, I believed that he was. At that time, our father was working far away in the United States. Our mother was taking care of us by herself. She had an important appointment very early on Saturday morning. She had to leave the house before I woke up, but I didn't know this. When I woke up that Saturday, I looked around for my mom. I couldn't find her anywhere. I went to my brother and asked him where she was. She's still sleeping, he told me. Don't wake her up. So I went about my normal Saturday morning routine. I ate my cereal and watched cartoons on TV. But as the hours passed, I started to wonder why my mother wasn't awake yet. She always got up early, even on weekends. After a few more hours, I decided to go check on her. I walked to her bedroom and slowly opened the door. What I saw made my blood turn cold. My mother's bed sheets were covered in dark red stains that looked like blood. There was a lump under the sheets that looked like a person's body, but the body wasn't moving at all. I started screaming and crying. I ran to my brother as fast as I could. Someone kill Mom. I sobbed. There's blood everywhere and she's not moving. My brother looked at me with a strange expression on his face. Then he said something that made my world collapse. You weren't supposed to see that. Now you have to help me hide the body. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own brother was telling me that our mother was dead. And worse than that, he was telling me that I had to help him hide her body. No, I screamed. I won't do it. We need to call the police. But my brother was much bigger and stronger than me. He was a teenager, and I was only 8 years old. He grabbed my arm and started dragging me toward our mother's room. You have to help me, he said. If you don't, we'll both get in trouble. I tried to fight him, but it was no use. He was too strong for me. He forced me to walk into our mother's bedroom where the body was lying under the bloody sheets. My hand was shaking. My whole body was trembling with fear. I felt sick to my stomach. This couldn't be real. This had to be a nightmare. Now, help me move the sheet so we can carry her to the closet, my brother ordered me. I stood there frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't touch those bloody sheets. I couldn't touch what I thought was my mother's dead body. I can't, I whispered. I can't do it. My brother stared at me for a moment. Then suddenly, he burst out laughing. He started laughing so hard that tears came to his eyes. He was laughing like this was the funniest thing he had ever seen in his life. At that moment, I felt something I had never felt before. I felt pure hatred for my brother. This person who I loved almost as much as my parents had just made me think our mother was dead. And now he was laughing about it. It's just a joke, he said, still laughing. Look, he reached over and pulled the bloody sheets off the body. Underneath was not my mother's dead body. It was a body pillow, one of those long pillows that people use for sleeping. The blood was just ketchup that he had poured all over the sheets. I stared at the pillow. I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. For hours, I had believed that my mother was dead. For hours, I had believed that my brother was a killer. For hours, I thought my life was ruined forever. It was just a prank, my brother said, like that made everything okay. Mom went to an appointment this morning. She'll be home later. It was just for fun, but it wasn't fun for me. Not all. I ran out of the room and locked myself in my bedroom. I cried for hours. Even after I knew it was fake, I couldn't stop shaking. The image of those bloody sheets was burned into my mind. When my mother came home that afternoon, I ran to her and hugged her tighter than I had ever hugged anyone in my life. I was so happy she was alive and safe. "What's wrong, sweetie?" she asked me. I wanted to tell her what my brother had done, but I was afraid she wouldn't believe me. Or worse, I was afraid she would think it was funny too. My brother acted like nothing had happened. He smiled and joked with my mother like it was just a normal day. But every time I looked at him, I remembered what he had put me through. That harmless little prank affected me for years. For months afterward, I would wake up in the middle of the night and run to my mother's room to make sure she was still breathing. I became afraid that something terrible would happen to her when I wasn't watching. I also lost trust in my brother. How could I trust someone who thought it was funny to make me believe our mother was dead? How could I trust someone who forced me to help hide a body? Even now, years later, I still think about that day. I still remember the terror I felt when I saw those bloody sheets. I still remember the hatred I felt when my brother started laughing. My brother thought it was just a harmless prank, but there was nothing harmless about it. He had no idea how much damage he did to me that day. Some jokes aren't funny. Some pranks leave scars that never fully heal. And some brothers don't deserve the trust they break. I have experienced many scary things in my life, but the most unforgettable one happened when I was in my 3rd year of high school. I was only 14 years old at the time. My family was very poor, so I had to work while going to school. I was what people call a working student. I worked as a housemaid for a family during the day and studied at night. This was the only way I could afford to continue my education. The house where I worked belonged to a friend of my grandmother. My grandmother had worked there as a housemaid many years before, and now it was my turn. The owners were an old married couple, a retired soldier and his wife, who used to be a teacher. The house was very old and full of mysteries. It was built before World War II, which means it was already more than 50 years old when I worked there. After the war ended, the owners had renovated only half of the house. The other half still had all the original furniture and decorations from the old days. When I was working there, only 3 people lived in the house. There was a retired teacher, the old woman, her grandson who visited during the day, and me. The old soldier had passed away, and the grandson always left at night, so most evenings it was just the old woman and me in that big, creaky house. One morning, the old woman had to go to the city for some business. She left very early, and her grandson wasn't coming that day. This meant I was completely alone in the house for the first time. I started my morning chores around 6 o'clock. I had to clean the floors, dust the furniture, and organize the rooms. But I loved to dance, so I decided to make my work more fun. I turned on the old radio and found a station playing Spaghetti Pababa, which was one of the most popular songs at that time. I began dancing while I worked. There was a large, old mirror in the main room where I was cleaning. This mirror was very special. It was antique and had beautiful little flowers carved into its frame. The mirror was positioned so that when you looked into it, you could see the wooden staircase that led to the 2nd floor. I danced in front of this mirror, watching myself and having a great time. The music was loud, and I was completely lost in the rhythm. Dancing always made me happy, especially when I was alone and could move however I wanted. But after a few minutes, I started to feel strange. I had the weird feeling that someone was watching me. You know that feeling when you can sense eyes on you, even when you can't see anyone. That's exactly what I felt. I stopped dancing and quickly turned around to look behind me. Nobody was there. The room was empty except for me. I looked toward the stairs, thinking maybe the grandson had come home early. But I didn't see anyone. I'm just being silly, I told myself. I'm alone in the house. There's nobody here. I started dancing again, but the feeling of being watched got stronger. It was like someone was standing right behind me, staring at me while I moved to the music. Finally, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I stopped dancing and looked directly into the old mirror. What I saw made my blood freeze. There, reflected in the mirror, standing on the staircase behind me, was a boy about my age. He was wearing all white clothes, white shirt, white pants, everything white. His hair was cut in a simple, straight style that reached just to his shoulders. But the most shocking thing was his face. He was very handsome, and he was smiling at me. Not a scary smile, but a gentle, friendly smile like he was enjoying watching me dance. I stood there like a frozen statue. I couldn't move at all. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I knew for certain that I was the only living person in that house, but there was clearly someone standing on those stairs. I tried to scream, but no sound came out of my mouth. Even if I had been able to scream, nobody would have heard me because the radio was playing at full volume. I wanted to turn around and look at the stairs directly, but I was too scared to move. Instead, I kept staring at the boy's reflection in the mirror. He just stood there, smiling at me with those kind eyes. This went on for about 3 minutes, though it felt like hours. The boy never moved from his spot on the stairs. He never stopped smiling. He just watched me with that peaceful, happy expression on his face. When the song finally ended and the radio became quiet, I found the courage to slowly turn around and look at the real staircase behind me. There was nobody there. I looked back at the mirror. Empty. Just the reflection of an empty staircase. But those 3 minutes when I could see him in the mirror, those were completely real. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't been dreaming. There had been a boy standing on those stairs, watching me dance, smiling at me like we were old friends. When the old woman came home that evening, I was still shaken up. I tried to act normal, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. Finally, I gathered the courage to ask her about it. "Ma'am," I said carefully, "I saw something strange today. In the mirror, I saw a young boy on the stairs. He was about my age, wearing white clothes with shoulder-length hair. Do you know who that could be?" The old woman's face became very sad when I described the boy. "Oh, my dear," she said quietly. "That sounds like my grandson. Not the one who visits during the day, a different grandson. He died in this house several years ago when he was very sick. He would be about your age now if he were still alive." My heart started beating fast. He died here. Yes, poor boy. He was only 14 when he passed away. He spent his last months in this house, and we took care of him until the end. He was such a sweet, gentle child, always smiling, even when he was very ill. That explained everything. The boy I had seen was a ghost, the spirit of the old woman's grandson who had died in this house. But the strange thing was, I wasn't scared anymore after learning the truth. The boy's smile had been so kind and peaceful. He didn't seem angry or dangerous. It felt like he had just been curious about the music and had enjoyed watching me dance. Maybe he missed being young and alive. Maybe he missed dancing and having fun. Maybe seeing me dance had brought back happy memories for him. I'm 29 years old now, but I have never forgotten that moment. Even after all these years, I can still picture his face perfectly in my mind. He was truly handsome, and his smile was so warm and genuine. I often wonder if he's still in that house, watching over his grandmother. The old woman is still alive today, though her husband passed away long ago. I hope she finds comfort in knowing that her grandson's spirit is still with her. Sometimes I think about going back to visit that house and dancing in front of that old mirror again. Maybe the boy would appear once more, just to smile at me and remember that morning when we shared a moment across the boundary between life and death. It was the most beautiful and terrifying experience of my life, and I will carry it with me forever. This is a true story that happened to me when I was 12 years old. My family was staying at a fancy hotel for my cousin's wedding. We had several rooms on the same floor, one for my parents and grandfather, one for me and my sister Clarissa, and bathrooms down the hallway. One morning, I woke up when someone gave me a rough shove on my shoulder. I thought it was my sister trying to wake me up. I looked at the clock and saw it was about 7:30 in the morning. I got out of bed feeling sleepy and confused. As soon as I stood up, I smelled strong hairspray fumes in the air. I could hear someone taking a shower in one of the bathrooms down the hall. I also heard quick, hurried footsteps running around and the sound of someone spraying hairspray over and over again. My family was clearly getting ready for the wedding events that day. I walked to the dresser and pulled out a nice blouse and skirt to wear. While I was getting dressed, I heard someone knocking on my bedroom door. "Coming," I called out, pulling my shirt on completely. I opened the door to see who it was. Nobody was there. I looked up and down the hallway, but it was empty. That was weird, but I figured I was still half asleep and maybe I had imagined the knocking. I left my bedroom and walked down the hallway toward the bathrooms. As I passed the first bathroom, I heard the shower turn off, followed by my father's heavy footsteps inside. At the end of the hall was another bathroom. I could hear the hairspray spraying sound coming from there, so I knew someone was inside getting ready. "Hey, Mom," I called toward the bathroom door. "I need to use the bathroom, and Dad's in the other one." "Alrighty," came my mother's voice from inside the bathroom. I stopped and frowned. It was definitely my mother's voice, but she had never said alrighty in her entire life. My mom always said okay or sure, honey, never alrighty. I rolled my eyes and figured she was just in a hurry because of the wedding preparations. Since both bathrooms were busy, I decided to go wake up my grandfather. I could hear loud snoring coming from my parents' room, where Grandpa was staying with them. I wondered why my parents hadn't woken him up, yet if they were already getting ready. I opened the door to their room and got the shock of my life. The room was completely empty. All 3 beds were empty and neatly made. Nobody was there, but I had just heard my father in the shower and my mother in the other bathroom. How could their room be empty? Just then, all the noises stopped. The hairspray sound stopped spraying. The footsteps stopped walking around. Even the smell of hairspray disappeared from the air. Everything became completely silent. I got scared and ran downstairs to the hotel restaurant as fast as I could. When I got there, I saw my entire family sitting at a table, eating breakfast. My dad, my mom, my grandfather, and my sister Clarissa were all there, already dressed and eating their food. I looked at my watch in confusion. It said 10 a.m. How had 2.5 hours passed? I had just woken up at 7:30, and it felt like only 15 minutes had gone by. My mother stared at me with a strange expression on her face. "What's wrong?" I asked. My sister Clarissa looked at me like I was crazy. "What the heck?" she said. "You literally just went to the bathroom." She pointed toward a small bathroom next to the hotel's kitchen area. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "I've been upstairs this whole time." But as I walked over to the bathroom she was pointing at, I could hear someone inside. I pressed my ear to the door. Sure enough, someone was in there washing their hands. I started to feel really scared, but I tried to stay calm. I counted my fingers to make sure I wasn't dreaming. 10 fingers. I was definitely awake. I knocked on the bathroom door. From inside the bathroom, I heard my own voice answer, "Alrighty." It was my voice saying the word my mother had never used. My voice coming from inside a bathroom where I wasn't supposed to be. I looked back at my family. They were all staring at me with pale, terrified faces. They had heard it too. Behind me, I heard the bathroom lock click open. Then I heard my own voice say, "Hey there, Sarah." I heard footsteps walking away from the bathroom. I spun around just in time to see a pair of legs wearing my black velvet flats, the same shoes I was wearing, disappearing around the corner toward the staircase. Someone who looked exactly like me was walking away from that bathroom, but I was standing right here. I felt completely paralyzed with fear. Goosebumps crawled up my back and arms. I couldn't move for about a minute. My whole family sat frozen at the breakfast table, staring at me with wide, frightened eyes. Finally, I found my voice and told them everything that had happened upstairs. The wake-up shove, the shower sounds, the hairspray, the empty room, all of it. After I finished my story, my sister Clarissa spoke up in a quiet, scared voice. "Sarah," she said, "something like this happened yesterday too." but I didn't tell anyone because I thought I was going crazy. My heart started beating faster. What do you mean? Yesterday morning, when I woke up, you weren't in your bed, but I could hear noises coming from the bathroom, like someone was getting ready. When I went to check, I saw you walking down the hallway in your pajamas. I called out to you, but you didn't answer. You just kept walking. She paused and looked scared. But when I went back to our room to ask you why you ignored me, you were still sleeping in your bed. You were right there, asleep, like you had never left. I felt sick to my stomach. This thing, whatever it was, had been copying me for at least 2 days. My family didn't know what to say. We finished breakfast in silence and tried to enjoy the wedding, but I kept looking over my shoulder, wondering if I would see myself again. 2 years later, I was visiting my cousin, the same one who had gotten married at that hotel. She now had a 6-month-old baby, and we were sitting together drinking tea and catching up. I decided to tell her about what had happened at her wedding. I thought enough time had passed that it would just be an interesting story to share. But when I finished telling her about seeing my duplicate, my cousin's face went completely white. "That happened to you too?" she whispered. The goosebumps returned to my arms and legs. "What do you mean, too?" My cousin set down her teacup with shaking hands. During my wedding weekend, something similar happened to my husband. Well, he was my fiancé then. He told me about it on our honeymoon. What happened? He said he woke up early one morning and went downstairs to get some breakfast. When he got to the hotel restaurant, he saw himself already sitting at a table, eating cereal. The other version of him looked up, smiled, and said good morning like it was perfectly normal. I felt chills run down my spine. Then what happened? The other version of him said he was going upstairs to get something from the room. My husband waited and waited, but he never came back down. After about 20 minutes, my husband got worried and went upstairs to check on him. My cousin's voice became a whisper. When he got to their room, he found himself asleep in bed, still wearing pajamas. He had never left the room at all. We sat in silence for a long time, both of us trying to understand what we had experienced. That hotel had somehow created copies of us. Perfect duplicates that could walk around, talk, and act like real people. But they weren't real. They were something else entirely. I never found out what caused it or why it happened. But I know one thing for certain: I will never stay in that hotel again. Some places hold mysteries that are too dangerous to solve. Some experiences are too terrifying to repeat. And some questions are better left unanswered.